Yay, we're live. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our fun chat today. Yay! Yes, Lauren and I are so excited for today's live stream. I'm gonna let Lauren quickly introduce herself to anybody in the audience that doesn't know her yet, and then I'll quickly introduce myself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lauren Sevier. I am an author, YouTuber, and mom from down home, Louisiana. And I have a YouTube channel of the same name where I talk about pretty much everything with books, writing books, reading books, editing books, selling them, usually with a glass of wine in hand and a lot of Southern sass. So if that's your jam, check me out. And yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Hi, Lamonique. Thank you for joining us. I love you, girlfriend. She says, hi, Lauren.
Hi.
So I'm Kammi. For anybody who doesn't know who I am, this is my channel. And I got tired of sifting through crappy writing advice, is really what it is. And I said, you know what? I'm going to create the writing advice that I wish existed, or I'm going to compile it. And I'm going to find it, I'm going to collect it, and I'm going to make the most efficient resource for writers on YouTube. And that is my goal. And my promise to you is to never publish anything that I don't fully stand behind. I published my first poem when I was 16. I started writing when I was 11. Creative writing is not a new thing for me. However, I've recently started writing novels. So a lot of people get hung up on well, you don't have a published novel yet. Well, let's use that to introduce our bad writing advice, shall we? That publishing a novel means that you are automatically qualified to give writing advice, that it's going to be just fantastic because you've published, and that if you don't have a published novel, everything that comes out of your mouth is crap. Yeah. Okay, no. You know the saying, the proof is in the pudding? The proof is in the writing. Okay, so there are a lot of even YouTubers, and this is why I named it the way that I did. There are AuthorTubers with bigger channels who shall remain nameless, just like in Harry Potter. And and I will tell you that their advice stinks as much as their writing does. And it does not matter that they have a couple published novels. It still stinks. So please judge a writer's advice based on the quality of their writing. Do they know what they're talking about? Is it quality? Does it work? You don't have to have a degree in creative writing to be a good writer. You don't have to have a published novel, but you do have to understand the craft well. And a lot of published writers don't. Lauren, I'm gonna let you take this.
Yeah, then there is also the thing about advice is like, just again, another old adage, I guess, is those who can't do teach. It's really easy to think that because you've written a novel or because you're a very good writer that you can give advice that is that works for everybody. And so I think generalization is a big problem with writing advice, because writing, especially creative writing in all its forms, it's a very individual process for people. And so, you know, if you generalize writing advice instead of saying this is what works for me, you know, maybe take these tips and see how they apply to your process. That's one thing. But a lot of people don't do that when they give advice. They're like, this is how you need to do it. And it gives unrealistic expectations for people. And again, as a creative enterprise, you know, creative writing, and the fact that it is a very individualized process, like some advice just doesn't work for people, you know, the way other advice will. So I think that there's something to that too, you know, just being careful about how you word advice to other people.
Yeah, and there's this idea that all the rules matter all the time, and that you always have to follow every single rule or you're an awful writer. And I think that that's stunting for people. I mean, I've heard people on Facebook talking about how it crippled their writing. They just, you know, the analysis paralysis, they just couldn't seem to move past that. And I thought I was a good writer before I saw the rules, and now I don't think I'm a good writer anymore. Now I don't know what to do. don't let the rules stop you, because just like anything in creative writing, the rules are subjective. The rules are a generalization, and they exist for a reason. They are sometimes misguided. They are sometimes not fully accurate, but they do exist for a reason. So today we want to talk about the advice that we think is either misguided or totally crappy, and why it is, and what was intended by the advice, how it could help us if we read it a little differently or understand it a little differently. So, hi, Mr. William Case. Thank you for joining us. And I appreciate the hello in the chat. And Lamonique says that she loves Southern sass.
Oh, I got plenty of it.
I love you. I love you. Yes. I've got plenty of sass. Sometimes it comes out and people are like, where did you get that accent from all of a sudden?
Yeah, mine's sass with an accent and usually some wine.
That usually comes with a head thing. And I used to banter, and anytime she was mad at my dad, she'd be like, that man's in trouble. She'd be going. And one time she said, he's going down like the Titanic. He's going to be wishing for the love boat. I died. He's going to be wishing for the love boat. I died. Oh my gosh. Oh, I love it. I love banter. I love her Southern sass. I love it.
A lot of my, like, I guess just funny things that I've said in the past and stuff is like so very specific to the South that it's just like you can't call it anything but Southern sass. Like literally, I would be like arguing with my husband. I'd be like, "You're driving me to Jackson," and he's like, "What does that mean?" And I'm like, Jackson, Louisiana, they have a prison and a mental institution. Like, you're either driving me crazy or you're driving me to kill you. Like, one or the other.
Funny. That's super funny. I love it. Yeah. Okay. I could talk to you all day long because I just love you. But let's get started on these. I'm going to start with this one. I do not love this one. Write what you know. Do you want to say why it bugs you or what you think it meant?
So first of all, this writing advice is really vague, and a lot of writers, especially newer authors or writers, they take this very literally. So they tend to think write what you know means like write only the experiences that you've had in your life, only things that apply to you, almost like autobiographical. And so people tend to overcorrect this advice because it's really vague. So I don't like it for that reason. I also think that people tend to interpret this in such a way that it means that they can't actually create like fantastical worlds. They can't, they can't learn about other cultures or include elements of other cultures and stuff in their writing. You absolutely can. You just have to do it appropriately and sensitively, and you don't need to like take on, or basically like a lot of people, whenever they say write what you know, this is gonna, I think, tie into something that you want to talk about later, but they basically mean like only write your experience. But I think that the beauty in humanity and in writing is like discovering different layers of humanity, which means writing outside of your experience.
Exactly. Writing outside your own color, your own culture, your own language, your own nationality.
But you have to do that, of course, sensitively. Like there's ways that you have to be aware of different things. You have to not try to write an experience.
No cultural misappropriation here, people.
Yeah, like I don't even know how to like phrase it, but it's basically
I do. I've got 2 videos on it. I can link it for you. I know exactly. I know exactly what this is all about.
Yeah, it's just part of like understanding society, understanding other people, being an empathetic person, like trying to see different points of view and different perspectives. Like being able to explore that through your writing is a really beautiful thing because it connects you to other people. And so I think that as long as you're doing it appropriately and you're doing it in a way that's constructive and not destructive, and that you're not like diminishing a marginalized community or anything like that, you're uplifting them, but you're not taking credit for their cultural experiences at the same time that you're including it in your work. I think that that is something that's really beautiful. But I also think that, again, it's just really vague advice, and that a lot of people take it so literally that it actually restricts their creativity, you know, especially newer authors.
And honestly, I think that what's intended by it is that you don't write a story that's bigger than you are, that you cannot write appropriately, whether that be someone else's culture or whether that be like, for example, I would not take on a hard science fiction. I would not. Dal, I love you. I love you. I love you. Thanks for joining. There are certain cultures that I would not take on. There are certain minorities I would not take on because I know me and my writing style, my voice, and I know that I don't know enough about those cultures. I could never research enough to be able to present it appropriately on page. And I love the way Brandon Sanderson talks about this. He said when he was researching, I believe it was Way of Kings that has a doctor in it. Please don't shoot me in the chat if it's not. I have not read Way of Kings. Sorry, people. Sorry, Sanderson fans. But he said that he recommends doing 75 to 80% of the research yourself, and then finding an expert to get you the rest of the way. So I would be extremely intimidated taking on a hard science fiction. That would be more work than I would want to put into the story, but I may not always feel that way. I may come to a point where I feel comfortable. I have a lot of science nerdy friends. I love my nerdy friends. Sorry, nerdy friends. I just called you nerdy friends.
To be a nerd is a compliment.
Yes, I think it is a compliment. I love you all. But I have a lot of people that I could go to and say, hey, does this look right? So it's something also, that I could potentially do.
Yeah. Also utilizing resources if you're writing something that's like outside of what your own experiences, like sensitivity readers, reaching out to people who are professionals in the field. Like, for example, I reached out to doctors when it came to, because I work with physicians, so it wasn't like hard, but like I reached out to them and I said, hey, I need you to read these sections. I need to know what is medically accurate in these scenes where these characters get really hurt and whatever, and stuff like that. Like, there are ways that you can actually like fact check things in your writing. I think the spirit of this writing advice, however, write what you know, is really about the human condition. And I think that that's something that is not clear whenever people present this advice. Write what you know, I think, is more emotional than it is technical. It's about writing.
And I understood it as technical. So it is really big because you and I even understood this totally different. Lamonique is in the chat and she said that she thinks this advice is meant for newer writers that don't quite know how to create new worlds or things like that. If I'm understanding you incorrectly, Lamonique, just let me know. But to kind of get them started, and that it's a rule that helps them just like ease into it.
So like, for example, since creative writing, again, it's very personal. I'm going to use my own book as an example. I wrote a young adult fantasy novel. It has themes of climate change in it. But some of those themes, like the main conflicts, came from things that happened in my life. My journey through IVF. My son was frozen as a 5-day-old embryo for 6 days before he was thawed out, and we had a procedure. And then, you know, he grew for 9 months in my stomach and stuff. And when he was born, he was really like sensitive to cold. And so that grew the conflict in my novel of the impending threat of winter, and the cold is like a major conflict throughout the first novel. And so that came from my life. It was something that I knew, that I interpreted into this world that I built. So I think that it can be very emotional, you know, human loss, grief, pain, suffering, love, lust, like all of these are very universal human emotions that I think we all know. So if you say, write what you know, write the experiences that you know intimately into your novel so that other people can relate to it, because those are universal experiences.
Yes, you know? Absolutely. Absolutely. And Dow told you to preach because she knows what you say. And then she said, if we only wrote what we know, then Toph Bei Fong, I think is how you pronounce that, wouldn't exist.
Toph from Avatar. She's the earthbender who's blind, the earthbending master.
Yes, look at you. I should have known exactly who she was talking about. Love Toph. Yeah, you know what?
I'm in there too.
You know what? A lot of genres wouldn't exist if everybody followed this advice literally. There would be no horror. There would be no thriller or a limited amount of thriller. There would be no fantasy. They would mostly be autobiographies and memoirs, like you were saying earlier. It's just too strict of a rule. It's not what it means. Go into it intentionally. Whatever cultures, whatever career specialties, the technical stuff, whatever you put in your novel, be intentional about it and research it, and then find the expert to get you that next 20%. And that's how you do it. That's how you write something you don't know. My main character in my current work in progress is a very angry dragon. And I have never been a very angry dragon. I have been a very angry mama. I have been a lot of things, but I've never been a very angry dragon. So
my main character is a biracial survivor of human trafficking. So she's definitely very different from me.
Yes, exactly.
You know.
So, and you know what? Your book highlights some very, very important, crucial issues that exist in America, and I'm so grateful that you wrote it, even though it was outside of your personal experience.
Yeah.
Dow says, plot twist, I'm Icelandic. Surprise!
she wrote a book where her character is Icelandic. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking, Lamanique said, I was thinking more of the very beginning writers who don't know how to start with word one. Yeah, I think so. I agree with you. I think it's more for beginner writers. And then thank you for sharing your personal story. But a technique. I don't know what but a technique refers to, Lamanique. And then Nihilist Geek says, the internet is full of terrible writing advice, and also the meat space is too. I don't know what the meat space is. Please tell us, because I don't know what it is either, and I love it. And yes, and AuthorTube is full of crappy advice. So please, 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 please be careful which channels you subscribe to. I actually start adding videos on my own channel, and I'm going to keep growing my own channel of quality writing advice, and I'm going to categorize it for you guys. So if you want to write a thriller, there's going to be a whole playlist from authors across YouTube who know how to write a thriller, who know how to write a good thriller. And so I'm collecting stuff from AuthorTubers who write romance, who have great advice on romance, things like that. So I'm actually collecting the best advice I can find for you. But please don't watch channels where they're writing.
He said meat space is the offline world. Okay, that makes sense because we're made of meat.
Yes.
I got it.
I get it. I'm slow, but I get things eventually. I don't wear my glasses during the live streams because I can't get the ring light not to show, but I need reading glasses. And so that's why I keep like squinting and moving forward in case anybody's wondering the weird junky shuffle that I'm doing. I'm actually trying to read your comments. It should not be this hard, but it is.
You can highlight them on the screen, like blow them up.
Oh, Lamanique said it shouldn't be a rule, but a technique.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. Yeah. Because techniques you can either apply to your writing or you can
they're tools that you pull out sometimes.
Right,
sometimes. Yes, I love that. Yes. Okay, let's move on to the next one because I think we've beat this horse too long. Yeah. It's dead. It's dead. Okay, stay in your lane. Now this one is about race, usually. Always, maybe. I don't agree with this. I don't side with this. I was born into a very Caucasian family, very vanilla. I talk about my experience all the time on the internet. There was a lot of mental illness in my home, hence my love of psychology and abnormal psychology. And when my parents got divorced when I was a teenager, they both did the same weird thing. And they both married interracially, but there was a 20-year deviance between them and their spouse. So my mom married a Mexican American who was 20 years older than her. So literally her mother's age. And my dad married a Black American who was 20 years younger than him. And so my family almost overnight went from being everything vanilla to being totally diverse. And so, you know, I like to say a lot that, you know, I can't speak to how the writing field is. I cannot speak to how many writers of color they are. I cannot speak to the equality that goes into which manuscripts get accepted and who gets published. The only thing I can speak to is who I am as a writer. And I can't change my skin. I can't change my background. I can't change who I am, but I can change how I represent this world. I can change how I show up. And if I write cultures as if they exist, or as they exist, if I write the beauty that exists in the world, it invites people in. It encourages them to love these cultures, and it encourages social change. I like to do it in a very soft way rather than a hit you over the head with a mallet sort of way. I like to let people in. I like to let people love the people and the cultures and the places that I'm writing about. So I don't love stay in your lane, because I feel like there is some misguided intentions here.
I think with this advice, specifically with this writing advice, there's a sort of extremism on both sides that happens, and there's not a lot of people who understand sort of the nuances of the middle ground. It's either there's like this hyper vigilance that they're so terrified to include stories about races or cultures or ethnicities that are outside of their experience because they're afraid of censure, or they're afraid of getting it wrong, or they're afraid of all of that, that they exclude this completely. And they end up writing, and I've read so many of them, Land of the White People. And like, that doesn't actually portray the society that we live in today. So it doesn't even look like anything that I can relate to. You know,
other extreme. We can't have the other extreme either, where you're just
right, or it's the other extreme where you have like
somebody to die in the first 10 minutes.
Or you have the other extreme where it's like there's these people who are trying so hard to write marginalized communities and stuff that they're actually taking voices away from authors who are trying to write their own experiences from marginalized communities, as we've seen with like American Dirt, for example.
Yes, and that's misappropriating someone else's
misappropriating somebody else's culture, offending them, all of that. Whereas, like, for example, in my, again, I'm just going to use my book as an example, but as a white Southern author, you know, who wrote a young adult fantasy novel, what I wanted to write a world, like, it's a fantasy novel. It's a world that I've created. So I wanted to see people of all different races and ethnicities and stuff in different positions of power and in different, like, I wanted to see them integrated into society, because that's what the world around me looks like. And so that's what I wanted my son to see, was that, like, you know, hey, guess what? Like, it's a young adult fantasy novel, but that doesn't mean that, like, all of the people of color are servants, whereas all of the white people are, like, you know, lords and ladies. No, we have people in different positions of power across the entire world of all different shapes and colors, because that's what the world looks like, and it's how it should look like.
Yes,
you know?
And I want to read a couple of these comments, because I'm really liking how this is going in the chat. I mean, Dal says preach again. So I mean, clearly there's some agreements here. William said that both of his books started with inspiration from his own life, and that he branched off of that and created something different. And I know he writes some fantasy as well, so that's really cool. And then Lamonique says, we can't be so afraid to write about other races that we end up leaving them out of stories. I'm afraid this will happen with the way culture is going now. Yeah. And it's, Lamonique, it's one of the reasons I'm talking about it so vocally is because it's really essential. And there's just too much division. There's too much of assuming that somebody who thinks differently than you or believes differently than you or lives differently than you is bad and that you're wrong. The truth is we draw a straight line from our A to our B because of our experience, because of our background. Someone else coming from a different angle, going from a different A to a different B, and it's just as logical. And so we get a lot of this polarization in our society right now, and a lot in politics and things. And
William just asked a really good question. Could disability fall under this as well? Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely, 100% disability falls under this.
Yeah, so, and Dow said, turn it around. Yes, preach, Dow. Yes, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Trying to turn it around. Go ahead.
Another thing, for my series, for example, my husband actually has a chronic degenerative autoimmune disease. And so he's going to slowly lose his mobility throughout his life. And that's a very hard thing that like my family's had to deal with. And that's a personal thing because I've had experience as his spouse, like dealing with that. And that's something that I want to write into my stories. I want to make sure that I'm highlighting people of all different abilities. And characters that are neurotypical and neurodivergent as well, because I'm neurodivergent. But I think that the point is that we should be highlighting that humanity as a whole is not just one type of person. It's a lot of different people, and it's the differences that make us beautiful. It's the conflicts that arise from different perspectives and different things like that. And as long as you're writing societies and communities into your work that reflects that, then you know, I mean, I think that's a beautiful thing, and it should definitely be something encouraged and not discouraged.
Jessica, I love your comment. Jessica was asking a question. Am I following? If you write a fantasy world that you create, then color shouldn't matter. I sure hope so, because that's what I'm doing. Yeah, you should. Absolutely. You should create multiple races in your fantasy novel. You really should. They should all look different. They should all have a different way that their society functions. They should all have a different way that their government functions. They should all, I mean, you don't have to be intense about it like I do. Like I have a background in linguistics. And so when I created my language for one of my novels that I shelved recently, I literally chose which letters I culture used most frequently, and I used those to create names and weird common terminologies and things like that. I mean, you don't have to go that extreme, but each culture has its own way of beating, and they're going to look a little different. Maybe they're going to be different in the eyes. Maybe their skin's going to be different. They should represent the same variety that exists in America, in the world.
However, you and Dal are going to really get along in this chat, just from your latest comment. Just had to say that.
Wait, what? Sorry?
His latest comment, being visually impaired, it really irritates me when someone misrepresents a blind person. And Dal and I have had so many conversations. We actually did a live stream where I asked like a ton of different questions about like her publishing journey and obstacles that she's had, like reading books and stuff where she's seen visually impaired or blind characters like misrepresented and stuff. And we talked for hours like about that actually specifically. So I totally understand that.
Yeah, and I studied sign language interpreting, and if there's ever a culture that is not only misrepresented, but totally mistreated, it is deaf culture. Oh, look at you with the signing. How are we not the same person?
I told you we're the same person.
I know, it's really strange. But yeah, they are an underrepresented culture. They are a culture that is really taken advantage of frequently. I had a friend whose pediatrician told her, "You're not my patient, so I don't have to get an interpreter for you." Whoa, boy, howdy, is that illegal? When do you go from being a smart person to a bumbling idiot? Oh, when a deaf person walked in the room. Good to know.
I actually learned conversational ASL because I work full-time in cardiology, and I noticed that our deaf patients, before their interpreter arrived or before we had the interpreting machine, they weren't able to be greeted by someone, and I felt like that was dehumanizing. So I learned enough conversational ASL be able to greet deaf patients and to let them know, like, if their interpreter was on the way or if they had any urgent things that they needed to deal with, that they had somebody who could actually communicate that with them. Because I was like, it's dehumanizing for you to walk in here and have to wait until somebody else gets here before we can even say, like, hi, it's nice to see you.
I think that's so beautiful that you did that. I really honor you for that. That's very, very beautiful. And Jessica says, I'm just twisting up fairy tales and nursery rhymes and whatever else, and boom, new world. Yeah. Look at you. That's fun. That's a fun combo.
Basically, like, especially if you're writing fantasy, though, like, you're creating the world. So you get to create what it looks like. If you choose that you want to write Land of the White People and that's it, I mean, I guess that's on you. But like me personally,
I don't read it anymore because I don't like it.
Right, but like me personally, I like to see, you know, characters of all different backgrounds. Like in my fantasy novels, I like to see them in ways that are new and fun and unique, and I like that because that's what my life looks like. You know, I have friends of all different racial and ethnic backgrounds, and you know, I have family members, and I mean, people who like literally run into burning buildings with my husband on the daily, like of all different racial and ethnic backgrounds, and like, so that's what my life looks like. So that's what I want to read about, you know, and I want to see that. I want to see more of that in literature because it's reflective of life and of a society moving towards equity, you know, and that's something that I just want to put out in the world. So
Dominique says, beautiful heart. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
I agree. Okay, let's lighten this conversation up a little bit. Woo, it's getting heavy. Let's go with show, don't tell. Okay, I'm gonna jump into this one really fast because this is a personal pet peeve of mine. I don't like it. Okay, so people say that when you're in deep point of view, you never tell. Wrong. Wrong. And that you should absolutely never tell. And pick up a children's book. Pick up a very popular children's book, and I guarantee you they're going to be telling a lot. So the younger the child is, the more that they tell, and then the older the reader gets, the more that they show. So with young adults and things, those genres, you're going to be doing a lot of showing and a little bit of telling. But I will be honest with you, even the greats are coming out and they're telling stuff. And I will even show you. Hold on.
They're telling stuff, so she's going to show us.
All right. I'm going to show you. Look what I got for Christmas. Paulini's new book. And I was so excited for this. And guess what he does in the first, like, 2 pages? He tells something. Because it's something that happens before the story. It's important for the reader to know, but it doesn't directly impact what's happening currently. And it is something that needs to be just sort of told really quickly, and then we move on. It's information you just need really fast. So you tell during times of like transitions or during unimportant events, and you show the really hardcore things. You show the things that you want to have an emotional impact on the reader. You show the things that you really want the reader to see visibly, things like this. So I think this advice, while on the right track, is not fully accurate. And I think people get confused. And I know there's a writer out there that teaches people that you never, ever, 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 ever tell. And she has all these classes she teaches about it, and I don't agree. I don't agree at all. Okay, Lauren, you have an opinion about something.
I do. I'm over here like,
Yes.
So, as Kammi knows, while I am an author, I am also an editor, and so I edit manuscripts. And so I will say that my take on this advice is different than Kammi's. I think most of the time this is accurate, but this is a classic example of a generalization. There are, as Kammi stated, several instances where you do want to have more telling, but it has to do with your narrative voice. It also has to do with, again, what genre you're in, things like that. So this isn't specific to all writing, and it's been perpetuated as if this is specific to all writing. Now, Children's books, I will disagree with you. I'm actually editing, doing developmental edits for a children's book right now. And while the voice can have like a I'm telling a story type voice, you can still show sensory elements in the writing. And that's what show don't tell is supposed to mean, is that you're including more sensory elements throughout your work. And so you can actually do that even if you're in a telling voice, because most first person point of view books, it's more of a telling voice because you're hearing it from the character's own internal monologue, but you still need sensory elements to be able to understand the world that they're existing in and their conflict. You can't just be told everything.
I think maybe we're talking about different age groups and stuff too, because I'm talking about reader books and things like that, where kids are just really beginning and the language is hard enough that they can imagine something really well on their own, but they're not so good at following that imagination in the literary form because they're so focused on trying to read the words and understand the words.
It definitely depends. It depends on genre, but not all children's literature is like that. So that was just my one little caveat.
Okay, caveat. Correct me. I did not.
I agree because we agree on age group. Yeah, I definitely agree that it depends on age group. But yeah, show don't
genre, like you said.
Yeah, and genre. I think that this is actually really good advice, typically, but it is a classic case of a generalized advice that does not work for everyone.
And I think too that it's misrepresented as how do I say this? How you show is sometimes misrepresented. Because showing simply means that you are inside the mind of that character. When you're in deep point of view, you see what that character sees, you taste what they taste, you smell what they smell, and they use words that cause a sensory reaction. So if you close your eyes right now and I tell you to imagine in your hand a donut and bring that donut closer to your mouth and go to take a bite, you're going to be thinking about a memory that's tied to that, because our minds remember those sensory words more quickly and more vividly. And then imagine if you bite into that donut and it's a lemon. My mouth just watered because I said lemon and I was expecting donut. So those are the kinds of vivid imagery that go into show versus tell. They're the kinds that cause that type of reaction in the reader.
And so it's all about immersion. It's all about immersion within a narrative, because you don't want to be told that somebody's scared. You want to feel that they're scared through action, because that actually will drive the pace of the story forward and stuff as well. So there are other considerations with this. So this is a classic case of an overly generalized rule, but it's not necessarily bad writing advice. It just means that you have to find balance within your own work, and you have to understand how and if it applies to your own work.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
My thing earlier saying about the person that's offering these courses is, one, they're misrepresenting what showing and deep point of view actually is, and then two, they're saying you should never ever tell, and that's not right. You should. There are times where you can tell, and you run the risk of your story becoming overloaded or too wordy.
Absolutely.
too bogged down. Like if you, for those of you in America, have you ever watched the WB? They are all about pulling out the melodrama, and you love their series for the first 5 episodes, and then you're out, you're done, because they've killed it. They've gone too hard and heavy. And so you run the risk of all of those things. But Paolini, I mean, he has been his bestseller since he was in high school, when his 19. Mom published his first book.
He published Aragon when he was 19.
Excuse me. He wrote it. He started writing when he was 17. He published it when he was 19. Yeah. Thank you.
The reason I know that is because I'm a fan.
Anyway, my point is, this has been published by Tor. It is a fantastic book, and in the first couple pages, he tells. That's my point. He tells, because it was used intentionally. Use your tell intentionally. Maybe that's my point. Use it intentionally.
Yeah, balance. Strike the balance. know when it applies, know when to deviate from what you're doing. But yes, yeah. I agree with almost everything you
said. Sure. So just a few comments.
What's really sad, Miss Kammi, is that even the scores for the deaf don't even treat their deaf students. Even the schools for the deaf don't even treat their deaf students properly most of the time. I know for a fact the one here in West Virginia does not.
That's sad. Yeah, and it's true. It's really sad to see. And then when your story is about a concept that's kind of newish to many readers, you need to tell a little bit, otherwise they're lost. Yeah. You do have to sprinkle in your world building or your
position is really important.
Yeah. Absolutely. When you show too much, you miss the plot and overwhelm the reader. Yeah, and notoriously, I'm finding this to be like romance writers recently and things like that who are trying to do the showing because it's important for their writing, but then they end up doing too much. This is where I'm finding it being overloaded. I would say if you want to learn the balance between show versus tell, my personal opinion, maybe Lauren will disagree with this. She'll tell me if she does, guys. Anyway, so my opinion is to go to thriller writers because they have to really get inside the mind of the main character, the person that's investigating the crime, and they have to do it very well. And so if you want to see how you can show everything and still have a clipped pace, that's where I would go to get to the point where you're not overwhelming the reader. Although thriller writers can sometimes overwhelm the readers as well with too much. So I would go to some of the greats in the thriller writers and see how certain elements maybe could apply to whatever genre you're talking about. Like maybe the way that they see the crime scene, or maybe the way that something smells, or, they're really good with that vivid imagery.
A good hot tip, editing tip, I guess, for like the opposite end of this, if you're worried that you're telling too much and you're not showing enough, is if you search the word in your manuscript felt. If you use the word felt too many times, that's an indicator that you're just telling people how the characters feel instead of writing in like sensory language or enough like rising tension and building tension in your scenes that the readers can feel it and infer it themselves. You shouldn't have to tell them like how the character felt all the time. Balance there. So if you use felt a lot, then that's an indicator that maybe you should go and trim some of those instances and add some sensory skills.
Absolutely. I like to tell people that it's a lot like the game Taboo. I don't know if you've ever played that, but you have a card with a word on it, and you have to act it out so that everybody knows what that word is, but you can't say the word and you can't say the list of words underneath. And so so you want to get someone to feel the tension, but you can't say feel, you can't say tension, you can't say, so there's a list of words you can't use. You want to do that.
And you can't say the actual emotion. Like you can't be like, Susan felt scared.
That would be in the taboo list, yes. So it's a lot like the game Taboo, where if you want to get them to taste what the writer is tasting, because maybe they're a chef and it matters, or whatever. Either way, you can't say the word taste, so you can't say the actual sensory word. And there's just a list of generic words like that you can't use. And it's a really good exercise, actually, to get used to showing, is to eliminate those words. Like write a little short flash fiction under 1,000 words and eliminate all of the 5 cents words and see if you can't make something that's really immersive.
Yeah, that's a really cool exercise. I'm actually gonna try that.
You should. I think that flash fiction is I think it's the fastest way to improve as a writer, honestly, because it gives you a chance to focus on one skill at a time and really hone that skill. And when I was studying interpreting, I took some some trainings. Let's go with trainings. That's the word. That's the English word I'm choosing. Anyway, and they were talking about goals and how to set long-term goals and how to work on something in the moment that builds to an all-time goal. So if you want to be better at these 3 things, then you intermix them. You give yourself a chance to study, you give yourself a chance to practice, and you give yourself a break, and then you give yourself a review. And you don't review by rereading the information, you review by actually applying the information without looking at it again. Because when you are trying to remember a piece of information, and you don't go back to your notes, you are just trying to recall it on your own, what happens is your brain is literally building neural pathways. And so that's how you build is with exercises like this. So my theory is that yes, flash fiction is the fastest way to grow those skills.
William said, so kind of like charades. Yes. Yeah. Charades, words. Word charades.
Yes, word charades. Yes. I said act out, so I was probably confusing because taboo is all spoken. Yeah, they're very similar games. Yes, like charades. Oh, you guys are funny. All right, you caught me. I used the wrong word. I'm good at Englishing, guys. I'm good at it.
You know, I write way better than I speak. I think everyone does. I'm way more eloquent when I type. I'm like, wow, I can express myself so beautifully when I write it, but when I talk, it's like mer, 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 mer.
Yes, it's why we are writers and not speakers, right?
Exactly.
Okay, gender doesn't matter. This one goes back to my training. So when I trained to study to become an interpreter, excuse me, I have a water.
It happens.
When I studied interpreting, we had to learn how to speak for every gender, every race, everything, and there are rules for it. Hold on. Oh my gosh. Okay. And the rule is different age groups speak differently. Different genders speak differently. Surprise! Now, the same rules with interpreting a different race also apply to writing a different race. And it's about cultural misappropriation, and you never want to seem like you're mocking another culture. But let's focus on gender for just a second. It has to do with the wiring in the brain, and women function differently than men. They problem solve differently, they goal set differently, they speak differently. Women use what's called polite language. It's also called flowery language. We use a lot more adverbs. Our sentences tend to be longer. We use a lot more just descriptive language in general. Men, it's called, and we use a lot of called rapport building language. We like to connect with other people. It matters to us. It's kind of how a woman is wired. And then men tend to be very goal oriented. They do a type of communication that's called report communication. It's very direct. They give you the information and then move on. Their sentences tend to be smaller. This is generic. It's not always, but they tend to be smaller, more efficient, really. Do you see how long it took me to say that? That's a typical style of a woman. And you'll notice when you hear someone who is a male that speaks like a female, you'll notice that it's off. You'll notice that they speak like a woman. So, so yeah, there's a little bit of a difference in stuff like that. Plus, men tend to have more of a go out and get a career and move through the ranks sort of mentality, and women have a I'm going to study for the career I want and I'm going to stay there forever kind of a mentality. So it's a very different approach. Again, generalized, but it is a very different approach.
So with this advice, I'm not quite sure what gender doesn't matter for, as the author, or
yeah, as the author, because so here's the thing that a lot of people say, and Dow, I am not accusing you of being polite if you don't want to be called polite. Polite language is simply what it means is you hedge what you're saying. So instead of just saying I'm in Phoenix, so the Phoenix Suns is the worst basketball team or the best basketball team, you would hedge that by saying something like, in my opinion, you would qualify that information as if you need to. What it does is it sort of softens how it lands on someone else. And so a woman who uses that very direct kind of language will often be called a bitch. Sorry, I just cursed on my channel that doesn't have cursing on it. But that's the common mentality. And you find women who are very direct like that in CEO roles and things like that versus women who use more polite language. Is just a bias that exists. So the part of this that bothers me is when a writer, those blogs that you see where they say gender doesn't matter, just make a character and then add the gender later. It bothers me because even if somebody is transgender, or even if they're gender fluid, or even no matter what,
or non-binary,
yes, no matter where they feel like they are represented, how they feel, where they feel they fit, still informs how they approach life, how they make goals, how they set out on their journey, things like that. And then it's going to really affect their dialogue specifically. So for me, it would be, as a writer, really looking at gender first. I'm not saying, I'm only saying that when you create a character, you need to know their gender before you solidify the character and start writing.
I definitely can appreciate that. As far as we're talking about like writing characters, I wasn't sure if we were talking about like the gender of the author doesn't matter or not. Is kind of what I was getting at. I was like, what doesn't matter? The gender of the author? Like what?
No,
but for characters, for characters, I think gender identity definitely matters, because I think that no matter what story you're writing, they're going to have a different experience based on what gender identity they identify with. If they choose to be, identify as a biological female in a patriarchal society, like that's going to affect their experiences. It's going to affect their decision making, and it's going to affect, how they problem solve and how they move through the plot. So I definitely understand that. You need to understand like who your characters are and the world that they're in, so that you can understand how to move them through that world in a way that feels authentic, but in also a way that is either intentional or reactionary. So like that's another thing too.
Yes, and so I just want to add like a little piece here. Here's a little truth for you. The two more important things that are arguably the two most important things in a novel are going to be your characters and your plot. But from my experience, a reader will stop reading a book with characters they hate faster than they'll stop reading a book with plot that they hate. Because if they can connect with the character, they just want to see that the character survives. They want to see that the character is successful. They want to see that the character beats out the antagonist or wins against the villain or whatever it is. So they're going to keep reading even if they don't love the plot. But if they hate the characters, it does not matter how riveting your plot is. They're like, I cannot stand that guy's voice, or I can't stand that woman, or how she. So just a little, just a little advice. Characters are essential for a successful novel.
I think gender identity definitely matters, and I think it matters as much in life as it does in writing. But because of a lot of what I've said, is a lot of writing is reflective of the world that we live in, and gender identity matters in the world that we live in because it influences experiences in your life. As we've seen over the last year, the last few years, like those stories are valid no matter how they choose to identify, and so for our characters, it's important as well. And again, that it all relates on like the society, because we're talking about creative writing. We could be writing anything from a children's book that's a fairy tale retelling to a fantasy novel with a huge cast of characters. It's like an epic quest, to sci-fi or thriller, or something that's like more contemporary and in the society we live in today. Like my co-author and I plan on writing actually a matriarchal society in a young adult fantasy, or in an adult fantasy novel that we're planning on writing probably next year. And so our female characters are actually going to be very different. Their decisions are going to be very different because they literally lead. They're in the part of society that like leads innovation and all of that. So they're not going to, again, have the same type of idiosyncrasies. Like a character in a contemporary, novel would, who is identifies as biologically female in a place where gender bias exists. Like,
yes, you should definitely look at Caribbean culture when you guys go into that, because it's a very matriarchal society. So
I'm so excited to write it. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it sounds fun. I love it. Of course, I'm not biased at all, but I love it. Dal says, as someone who writes both male and female pro tags, that gender does matter in her opinion, and that writing men is harder. Yeah, we tend to struggle more writing the opposite gender, and Brandon Sanderson talks
men
about
writing women as well.
What's that? Yeah, the reverse is true
for men writing women as well.
Yeah, and I have a video about writing about gender, and I can link that for you guys. And then Brandon Sanderson has a wonderful video where he talks about writing about gender and how men notoriously describe women by their body shape and different things like that in a way that a woman would never do. Those are the kinds of ways that we as writers should be careful and aware and make sure that we're writing a character the way that they would want to be represented. Sensitivity readers. So let's move on to this one. Okay, you had a strong opinion. You have a strong opinion about this one, so tell us.
Okay, so I think I have written about 1 million articles about this. Like, I can't even tell you how many blog posts and things that I have written about this. This is my #1 all-time hated piece of advice. There are huge, like Stephen King, I think, has said this to people. Like, I think almost, I can't even tell you how many people perpetuate this as if this should be an expectation for writers, right? Every day. I can't tell you how unhealthy this is to perpetuate as a standard. Writing every day, writing is a creative exercise, and creativity is like a well, and you can't draw on a well that is empty. I think that writing every day, if that's something that is healthy for you, if that is an exercise that makes you feel productive and happy, or you're able to like switch between different projects or whatever, like that's great. But this should not be a standard that every writer is thinking that they need to live up to, because it really causes a lot of burnout, mental health issues, depression, anxiety. People get exacerbated imposter syndrome over this. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous to expect people to write every single day of their lives. I mean, I would like to amend this advice very much to say work every day, because that is much easier for any writer, no matter their level, whether they're Stephen King or they're just starting to write something for the very first time. Working every day can mean different things. It can mean self-care. It can mean, it can mean research. It can mean, editing something that you've already written. It can mean actually drafting. It can mean so many things. And it still keeps you motivated, and it still keeps you productive, and it still keeps you moving forward, which is something that's constructive rather than destructive. But telling people you have to write every day, and that's the only way that you'll be successful in this industry, like that is so harmful to so many people. I don't write every day. I cannot do that.
So this goes back to what I was saying I learned about goal setting, because what they do is they have you choose a goal that you want for the next 5 years, and then where would you be in a year that would lead you to your 5-year goal, and where would you be in 6 months that would lead you to your year goal, and then what do you need to do over the next 6 months that leads you to your 6-month goal? What goals do you need to break down? And so maybe you want to fast draft your novel, or maybe you have certain writing techniques that you want to practice. And that's where, so they said the most effective way to work on something is to have 3 goals at a time, no more than 3, focus on one of them a day, and you rotate where you focus. And so, and you're not just writing the whole time. You're learning, you're practicing, you're then going through it as an editor, looking for both errors and successes, things like that. So each one of those should inform a different chunk of your practice time. And so if you are being very intentional about how you're spending your time, and you set aside time every day, like Lauren said, to work, and however that looks like for you, then you're going to come out of it much more progressed than someone else. And the idea behind having 3 goals at a time is that it allows your brain to rest from this one when you focus on this one and this one. And then when you come back to this one, you're going to sort of forget stuff because it's going to have been a few days. And so that's what I said about how your brain literally is building neurons, neurotransways, what's the word? Neural pathways. Neuropathways.
Neurotransmitters, but that's not correct.
No, it wasn't. Anyway, so your brain is literally building the bridge for you to remember it. That's what that is. It's literally building a bridge when you force yourself to remember and pull it out and use it. So in sign language, it was literally physically use it. In writing, it's going to be the creative form of use it. So yeah, what this advice I think was intended to do was to help people constantly be moving forward and progressing in the writing. I think that this is another one that really cripples people and makes them feel discouraged really quickly. Like being a mom of 3 littles, homeschooling one and potty training another one, and everything else that I have on my plate, I'm not writing every day, y'all. I give up. If that was the only way into this field, I'd give up. But for me, success looks more like what shows up on my page. Is it progressively getting better? Am I progressively moving forward?
That's another, like, I think level to actually this advice that we should talk about is write every day is perpetuated as a standard in the industry to be successful as an author. But I think it's very important that we understand success as an author is different for every person. Everyone has a different definition of what success looks like for them and their author journey. And knowing what success looks like for you and knowing what you have to do to get there, that's the first step before you write anything. You know, that's the first step before you decide to like walk this path is, am I comfortable being a self-published author who, you know, publishes what I want when I want and has this level of success? Or, you know, is my goal to be the next Stephen King? Or is my goal to write 50 books before I turn 50 years old? Or what does success look like to you? Is it a monetary value? Is it, you know, is it the number of books written? Is it number of readers? Is it, you know, your author platform? Like what does it look like to you? And I think that saying write every day is a standard to be successful is really just overlooking the fact that there are so many different paths to being successful. You know, there's so many different paths to being an author. And again, it's very individualized. So I don't like this advice at all. It can die in a dumpster fire.
I wonder if it's also intended to make writers sort of exercise their creative muscles. But again, what you said about burnout comes into play with that. Even if that were the case, it would be misguided advice.
It's just all around, terrible.
Yeah, so William says that he has a hard time writing female characters. Yep, it's pretty normal. Like I said, I will link those videos for you below, and I'm going to have to literally go through this video when it's over to figure out what all I said I was going to link for you guys. And Dal says that she can write every day, but she can't write her fiction every day. Yeah, that's because you're drawing from an empty well. That's because you need a break, like Lauren was saying. There has to be breaks in between things.
Taking breaks is one of the best pieces of writing advice I can give you. Breaks are really important. Taking in the world around you can inspire different things in you, having experiences with other people, going and socializing, you know, even if that's virtually right now with COVID or whatever else, like taking breaks from your work is actually really important to keeping productive with your work. Like, and that's not stressed enough, I think, enough in the industry.
Yeah, I think that maybe being intentional about not only the breaks you take, but how you structure your work time. Like I said, working in goals, like you said, working in breaks, just being intentional about it, aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and not just do something habitually, which this advice recommends. Do it habitually. I don't recommend it. Don't do it.
Terrible. We're throwing it away.
So I feel like that one sort of feeds into this next one. If you read, you're going to be a good writer. And if you want to be a good writer, you should read. I think this advice is well-intended. I think it has good, like I said, well-intended. So I think there are good aspects of it, but I think that it misses the mark here as well. I'm part of a lot of reader groups, and they have horrible English, some of them. They can't form a proper sentence, or they misuse words, or just things that writers have to be able to do. They can't do them, but they enjoy and appreciate a good story. So it doesn't inherently make you a better writer. There's a specific way that you need to be reading, and a specific pool that you need to be taking from when you're reading. So not only just reading just whatever, but really looking at the greats, the ones that you admire, the ones that you want to be like. If you write horror, find your favorite horror authors. If you write romance, what do you appreciate? What do you appreciate about your top 5 favorite romance writers? Things like that. Take from their experience and try and incorporate it into your own. Like read like a writer. Look for the rules and where those rules are used, where they're broken. When you got emotionally invested in a scene, why did you get emotionally invested in that scene? What was the writer doing at that very moment? Things like that you can take and incorporate into your writing. And you can also learn pacing and technique and what a good story looks like from reading, but it's not automatic, I suppose.
Yeah. I agree with pretty much everything you said. Just because you read books doesn't automatically make you a good writer. You have to learn how to read critically. Definitely agree with that 100%. I do think, again, you did say this was well-intentioned advice, and I think that there is some merit to it, but again, it's just mostly generalized advice. So it's not really specific enough. I think that you should, if you're writing a book in a certain genre, you should be reading in that genre. And you shouldn't just read the greats. I would actually say you should read things that are bestsellers, especially upcoming, so that you can see publishing trends, trope trends, especially if you're looking to publish in a certain way, because that's research too, right? If you're planning to query traditionally, a work that's a thriller, then you should be reading, books that are bestsellers from traditional publishers as they come out that year and as they're coming out, so that you can understand what are publishers publishing, what are they looking for, what are the things that readers are responding to in the genre and stuff too. So there's merit in that as well. If you're reading in the genre that you're writing in, then you can find those trends and then apply them to your own publishing journey, whether it's self-publishing, indie publishing, hybrid publishing, traditional publishing. So there's inherent value in that aspect of it, but that also means you're still reading critically. Just because you really like reading mystery novels and you read a lot of them doesn't mean that you'll know, what to do just by reading books. Like, you have to actually be able to see those connections and do the research and sort of like take that information and do something with it, so you have to have enough understanding. So I definitely agree with you on that. But I would say that reading in your genre that you're writing in is very important. I think that is really good advice. But I think saying like, to be a good writer, you just have to read a lot is really not, it's just not specific enough advice, like it's just kind of like
translate into your writing.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't automatically translate. Dow, I know you read with audiobooks, and so I think that maybe I misrepresented something a little bit here. I don't think that a proper sentence is the only thing that you need to be able to tell a story. I know that you are a good storyteller. I love your stories. What I'm saying is that simply seeing how someone else puts the words on the page doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do that the same way. So that was definitely visually
If you have a
tied.
big vocabulary from reading or listening to a ton of books, and you put a lot of big words into your book, but you totally don't know story structure or pacing or any of those other things, like it's still not gonna be a fully well realized novel, I guess. Maybe is a better analogy.
Yeah. I feel like there's more to it than simply a period here or whatever there. What I'm meaning is when people write a sentence that I can't read, I don't understand, and I can't make sense of it, because it's not that a word is misspelled or misplaced or punctuation is misplaced. It's that there's major lacking in an understanding of the English language in general. Those kinds of things, because I see a lot of people on the beginner writer groups and things like that saying, yay, I just published my first novel, and I don't understand, other than first novel and published, I don't understand anything else that they wrote. So that's kind of what I meant, is it doesn't always translate. So William says, whatever I read, I catch myself scanning for tips that might help me, like, for example, the way the author might handle a situation or a dialogue, etc. Yes,
that's reading critically. That's exactly what you should be doing. You should be picking out patterns and trends and stuff that you can translate into your own work, or that you say, I didn't like how this author did this. I want to do something different in mine. Like, that can also be reading critically, is what you don't like or what you want to subvert as far as a trope or a point in story structure or whatever else. Like, so reading critically just means that you're really reading like a writer, and then you take the lessons that you learn from the books that you like and the books that you hate and the books in your genre and the books outside your genre, and you're like applying them to your own work.
Yeah, so I really wish my friend Dave was here. Dave, if you're here, say hi, but I don't think you are. So I posted a page, just one page out of one of my favorite books. David Baldacci wrote, I want to say it's a YA fantasy. I don't know if it is a YA, then it would be kind of on the younger end of YA, because parts of it read kind of like a middle grade. But I think they're 15. So I think it's technically YA, but yeah, it reads like a hybrid between middle grade, like the voice in it. Anyway, and he's considered a master storyteller, fantastic. And I posted his page, and I said, look how good this is. This is like butter. I want to be like this. Can I be him when I grow up?
Butter.
Like butter. Yes.
Halloween, be proud, y'all.
Like butter. So my friend Dave was like, whoa, he used more than the word said. And I want to know how many times he did that, because that's another one of those rules that's misguided. Never use the word said. And so he went through and he literally highlighted every dialogue tag that wasn't the word said, or every section that had slightly passive voice or different things like that. And he's like, wow, this guy is considered one of the great storytellers, and he broke this many rules on one page. And the thing with rules like this is that they're intended to be a general guide. We use the word general quite a lot. Oh, look at that. It fed me right into this one. I did have this one. Never use said, always use said. No, both of those are wrong.
Dialogue tags from an editor's perspective.
Well, so really what you want to do is you don't want to call attention to the dialogue tag. You don't want it to stick out all the time, because then a reader is going to focus their attention on it and not be able to scan over it and move on. So that's kind of the idea behind. Am I right, Lauren?
Yeah, that's why a lot of people say not to use dialogue tags except for said or asked. And it's not, a lot of people have said only use the word said. But like if it's a question, you clearly have to say asked, because you don't say a question, you ask a question. So it already has been bastardized from the original advice, which was said or asked. And so the whole point to that advice is to help cut down on instances of shouted, yelled, whatever, because if you do that every single time, then it distracts the readers from the actual dialogue. Whereas if you say the word said or asked, typically readers are already conditioned to sort of ignore the said or asked, so they can just go right into the next line of dialogue or the next line of exposition afterwards, and it feels more immersive for readers. But again, with everything, there needs to be balance. I tend to try and keep the instances that I use exclamation points in my writing to a minimum, only whenever characters are actually like shouting at each other. But then when they do that, I don't want to say said at the end. They're shouting. If you're using an exclamation point, you should be using a different dialogue tag. So it's all about balance, really. You know,
I think that when
so
you
the only and never, it's just like you should never say only or never. You know, it's about balance. It's about making sure that you're not using too many instances of other dialogue tags, but that you're still like making sure, especially if there's like a lot of rapid dialogue, like between two characters, and there's like an argument or there's a lot of rapid dialogue, you may want to use said or asked in those instances, because you're really trying to get the reader through this dialogue because they're hearing it, you know, with your punctuation.
And that makes it punchier and it makes it clipped and faster. So it's going to feel more like an argument to the reader than if they have to pause for a dialogue tag. But so Lauren, tell us, when should we be using dialogue tags that are other than said? And before you answer, excuse me, I have a friend, Brandon, who did a fantastic video on the exclamation point and when to pull it out of your writing. And so I'm gonna link his video for you. He better tell me thank you later. So tell us, when is a good time to use a different dialogue tag?
Times I think where emotions are heightened, but not necessarily just when characters are yelling at each other. Like that's a good example. Like if somebody uses an exclamation point, like I hate you, exclamation point, she shouted, slamming the door. Like that feels natural in that context, right? But also, you know, if a character is unsure or you're trying to convey emotion that isn't conveyed within the dialogue, or that the dialogue tag really needs to back up the emotion. For example, like, I'm not sure she hedged, her eyes looking to the floor. You know, that helps to characterize the dialogue there, you know. So there are certain instances where you want to use dialogue tags that aren't just said, because you can't infer emotion in the word said. So that would be my example there on when to do it.
I love that. I love that. If you want to see a fantastic writer who breaks this rule on a regular basis, David Balachi breaks this rule on a regular basis. Because he's very intentional about when he says said and when he uses other dialogue tags. And so I'm with you, William. I love David Baldacci.
He's like butter.
Like butter. Seriously, have you read his Vega Jane series?
Check him out though.
It's a fantasy. It's a YA fantasy, so you might like it. I adore his storytelling. I just, if I could be him when I grow up, I would be very happy.
I want to be a mermaid when I grow up.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's how it works, though. Can we just decide what we want to be when we grow up, and then just
why not? Why not?
Yes.
There are no rules here.
Yes. Okay. So just to wrap up this really long conversation, because we don't have opinions about anything, clearly. So you guys, the point of this conversation is just to tell you guys that sorry, my brain is moving a mile a minute faster than my mouth. Woo! Gotta love that. just to tell you that not all writing advice is universal. It's not one size fits all. It's not for every situation. And some of it is been, like Lauren said, some of it's been bastardized from its original meaning. And so it's ambiguous. And so it's really hard to sort of pull out what it's intended to do for you. So please don't take it as the gospel word. You cannot deviate ever. I feel like the people who are master storytellers learn what the rules are so that then they can either use them or not use them. And to steal from Brandon Sanderson again, he said, they are simply tools in a toolbox for you, and you pull them out when you need them and you leave them when you don't, and you just change up your tools based on what the story is requiring of you. So for those of you who are interested, hold on, sorry, one more comment. I've been very intentional with my dialogue tags. If someone is whispering, I write that. If they tell, I write that. If it's just part of a regular conversation, I say just said. Does that sound about right, Lauren?
Yeah, being intentional and finding balance is what it's all about.
Absolutely. And William also says, I used to struggle with dialogue tags. I learned how to use description or action in between, so I don't have to use them as often anymore. Good for you. Finding ways around it. Yeah.
And that'll contribute to your own unique writing style. That's another thing, is the way that you handle these different elements all helps build on your unique writing style. Like mine has been said to be very lyrical in nature because of my first book called Songs of Autumn. And so there's a lot of lyrical, long, loose sentence structures and things in there. So that just helps to build your unique writing style, which is what readers who are fans of your writing will come back for again and again and again, book after book.
Yes, and it'll also help you flex those creative muscles. If we're going back to that weird analogy. Yes, exactly. I look at this muscle. Sorry guys, I'm like pushing up my bicep to show you how big it is when I'm really not flexing at all. Anyway, that's embarrassing to do on camera. So for those of you who are interested in Songs of Autumn, I have that linked for you below from this fantastic writer right here. And then this is a part of a 2-part series. Lauren, do you want to talk about what we're doing next?
So we're going to be going over some more writing advice that we think is incorrect, or that it might be misguided, or even some that maybe we like in a second part on my channel next Saturday, same time. My channel and everything should be, I think, linked down below. So if you go over there, I'll be setting up the StreamYard for that in the next day or so. If you ring the bell to get notified, subscribe to my channel, you'll get notified when we go live, and we'll be posting it in all the places as well. So there.
Yay! I'm so happy you guys came, and I hope you found value in this. And please don't forget to hit like, because it lets YouTube know that this is awesome. And they actually start promoting videos more when they have more likes. So always like my videos, please.
The almighty algorithm, help us beat them. I don't know what that is. I do it all the time. I don't know what it is.
I'm gonna start doing it every time I talk to you now. Yes. Okay, you guys are awesome, and I love you, and welcome to my channel, and we will see you soon.